Hi, in this lecture we're going to be looking at doing a little bit more advanced lighting and outputting a element for us to use in our comp. So right now this Zillow and City elements that we have, there is an asset that we don't have a render for, and that asset is a helicopter. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the 3D helicopter that we imported in earlier, and we're going to put a basic shader on there, and we're going to light it so we could use it in our 3D comp here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to disable these other assets because we don't really need it. But if you look through our 3D scene right now, and if we look through our camera, you could see we have this helicopter asset. And let me just enable these again just so we could see it in relations to everything else. So what we want to do is we want to put a couple lights down and light this helicopter so we could use with our comp here. So I'm going to disable these guys again, and we'll start assembling our basic light materials here. So let me just move those out of the way and move this up so we have a little bit more room. So since this is a military helicopter, what we're going to do is we're just going to basically create a simple constant node. And we'll kind of give this like an army green color, a green army color here. So let's go to, let's give this a little bit more, yeah, something like that, a little bit more army green. And we'll make sure we have an alpha channel that's being outputted. And what we'll do is we'll do a basic material. So we'll do apply material. And again, if we look at our 3D scene, look at our camera, what we'll do is we'll do apply material. And we'll plug this constant in as a material. And as you can see right now, we're not really seeing anything. It's fairly dark. So we want to do a little bit something more sophisticated here. What we want to do, instead of just directly plugging this material in, what we'll do is we'll grab another shader called basic material. So what we're going to do is we'll plug in our constant as a diffuse element. And now we'll plug this into our apply material. And right now it's very dark. But what we could do is we could put some lights down and we'll be able to see this a little bit better. So let's do that. Let's create some lights. So we'll start out with a light, and let me close this basic materials tab. Let's create a light. And already you could see we're seeing a little bit more influence and visibility on this. And let's create a scene node. And I'll duplicate this scene node, and we could plug this scene node in with our helicopter here. Now, if you look at our elements here, we could take our cues on where to put this light and the colors and intensity of these lights based on what our renders have. So we could tell is we have a sunlight that's hitting our character, and we have kind of an ambient skylight as well, kind of this cool tones in there too. So we could start with that, start by having this warm sunlight, and we could have a skylight as well too. And then if we need to, we could create a fill light as well too. So if we go back into our 3D scene, and I could pop this light out. So what we could do, we could call this light sun. And we'll change this light type to a directional light. Let me just boost this intensity to something so we could see it a little bit better. We could start swinging this light around. So maybe we'll do yeah, maybe about 20 on the X rotation, and we could swing this in Y as well. Maybe something like that, like maybe we'll go 80. And let's have a look at that. What we'll do is, let me close this, and we could put a scanline renderer down. So again, we'll go object being our helicopter, our render camera, our camera input, and now if we view this output, there's our helicopter. And what I'll do is I will put this over this base comp right here just so we could kind of see these together. So I'll just do a simple merge. And what we could do is just view this a little bit more easily. All right, so there we go. We have our helicopter rendered out, but you could see we're very dark in this, and we're obviously very hot on our specular component here. So one way to tweak this, obviously, is we could adjust the intensity of the light, but one thing I think we should do is revisit this basic material. And what I'm going to do with the basic material is I might pull the saturation out of this element. Maybe I'll put the saturation to 0.5. And I'm also going to do another grade. And what we could do is bring this brightness down, and we could plug this grade node into our emission. So we have a little base value, so we never have anything dark. And now if we view this, and what we could do is in our basic material here, we could increase the diffuse component. So maybe we could put our diffuse to 0.28. Okay, that helps give us a little bit more read. And the spec is very, very bright. So let's bring that down to maybe 0.25. That helps a bit right there. And we could bring the sheen down to 5. That helps. It kind of broadens it out a little bit. And then we'll put the maximum to maybe 20. Yeah. That looks a little bit more natural. So now it's nice. We're getting this light direction that matches to our render, but what we could do is we've got this base shader color, but let's adjust the color of this light so it mimics our warm tones of our sunlight in our render here. So if I go back to our sunlight, and let me pop this out. And what we could do is change the color. So by default right now it's just a neutral color, but maybe what we could do is set let's warm this up. So maybe we'll go to like 2. Maybe we'll go 1.75 or 1.7. Let's take blue out of this because we want it to be warm. So maybe we'll just do a blue of 0.2. It's feeling better, maybe 1.25. And then we'll take a little bit of that green out. So we'll go to 0.8 for the green. Yeah, that helps a bit. I mean, if we look at the specular tones on our Zillow character and the specular tones of that chopper right now, that helps. We're kind of getting in the ballpark. So let's close out of this. Maybe what we could do, so we could revisit this if we need to, but for right now, let's just say the sunlight is good. But let's add the ambient skylight that we're seeing in here too. So again, if I go back into 3D scene, you can see our lighting right now. Let's create another light. And what we'll do is we'll call this one sky. And let's pop this out too. And let me add this to our scene. And we'll change this light type to directional as well. And let me boost it so we could kind of see what it's influencing at the moment. So there we go. That helped just to see visually. And let's swing this light around. So I'm thinking in Y we should... That's pretty good right there, about -90 in Y. So we're getting a nice little bounce on the undersides right now. So if I disable this, you could see we're pretty contrasty. And then if I enable this, now we're getting some additional fill influence underneath the chopper, the helicopter propellers, and the underside here. And let's change the color on this too. Let's look at it on our output right now, see if that helps. Yeah, that helped already. So again, if we disable this and enable it, we're getting this influence. It's right now it's just giving us a little bit more of the ambient colors of our green shader that we added. So let's cool this light off too. So again, we'll come to our light, go to the 3 colors, and we'll take some red out. That helps a little bit. And let's really boost the blue on this. That helped a lot. I think I'll just take the green out just 10%. And that looks pretty good. Let's disable this. Yeah. And enabled. So now we're getting some nice bounce on here. And I think maybe one last thing. So let's close this out. Let's put a fill light down, just something else to just kind of give us a little bit more coverage in here. So again, let's look in 3D. And let's create another light. Yeah, I think just the default position of this at the origin is pretty good. It's filling us in, giving us some nice coverage in there. But what we could do, let me pop this out, and we'll rename this to fill. And what we could do is set the color of this fill light. So we'll go again. Maybe we'll set this to 0.5. That helps. Bring green down a little bit too, and we'll bring down blue by 10% too. And again, I'm going to disable and enable this. So that's a nice little fill level. I think I'm going to bring the intensity down too, maybe by 30%. We could go to like 0.7. Yeah. So let me close this out, and we could look at our output. So right now this isn't plugged in our stream, but if we plug this in, that's pretty good. We could always bring this intensity down too. Again, I'm disabling this, but it doesn't hurt us. It's kind of given us some tones that match what we have in our debris, and nothing is really dark overall. So that's pretty good. You could see, and now if by zooming in, obviously you could see this render quality isn't very great. So let's look at our scanline render and see if we could improve this render quality. So if I pop open our scanline render, let's put the anti-aliasing to medium. That helps right there. And then we could do the Z-blend mode. And right now it's set to none, but if we hit smooth, it should help clean up some of this chewy quality on things. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Maybe aliasing at high, see if that helps. Yeah, it's a little bit better. And the other thing we could do is, yeah, when we look at this at 1:1, that looks much better. And I might actually put the aliasing back to medium. Just, I don't think at this distance we're looking at it, we need it to be that high. And in this case, if we set the samples for motion blur on this helicopter high, I don't think we're going to get quite what we want to see out of this. So I think our best bet is to use the vector blur node. So let's see what the 5 samples looks like. I don't think it's going to really give us much. Yeah, as far as the chopper blades go, this 5 samples. So you could see clearly what these samples are doing. You're getting 5 instances of this motion blur. So let's set this back to 1. And I'm going to close out of the scanline render, and let's see if we could do our motion blur using the vector blur node. So here we have our scanline render. And let's do vector blur node. So we'll go scanline render, we'll go vector blur. And let's pop this out. So again, we just only want to really vector blur our RGBA channel. So we'll do RGBA. Our UV channels, we're going to use motion, which is being outputted by default. And now if we set our motion blur amount, and I'm going to uncheck soft lines, normalize. You can see the normalizing, again, if we zoom in here, if I look at our alpha channel, we're getting this odd behavior. So if I uncheck normalize, it's giving us a better motion blur here. And in fact, I could even increase this to maybe double the motion blur just so we could kind of get a real good sense of the propellers. And you can see that that helps a lot. So that was 1, and then we go to 2, we get a little bit better motion blur in there. And that should do it. If we look at this again, so we zoomed out and we view this over our characters, we've got, using the 3D lights, we've lit this helicopter to match our scene a little bit better. And now when we take this into our main comp with our sky and other color corrections and things, we could do some refinements to this. Like I think it definitely could use a little bit of gamma black corrections on this thing. So we could bring our gamma up a little bit. And we could also just darken this down a bit. Maybe something like that. Again, enable, disable, just giving us a little bit more fill. And also we could just do a touch of post filtering on this. So we could do maybe a 1 pixel blur. And we could also do an edge blur. So that's quite a bit right there, but if let me pop this out, and if we bring the amount down to 1, and if I enable and disable this, you could see we're getting a little bit of softness around the edges here. Maybe go back to 2. So you could see that's given us a little bit more smoothness on there. So there you have it. We took a 3D asset and put a basic shader on there, and we put 3 lights down to mimic what our 3D scene is doing, and we've got motion blur, and we're outputting this this helicopter. So it helps quite a bit. We could look at another frame, for example, 1082. And let's look at our helicopter. Yeah, not too bad at all. Well, there you have it. We've got lights using our helicopter geometry and doing basic material to render an element for us to add in our final composite. I'd recommend possibly pre-comping and writing this element out so you don't have to process this in your main comp tree, since we'll be doing other treatments to it that might slow things down. So especially with this vector blur node, I would recommend pre-comping this element out and using it as a 2D element. Look forward to covering some other topics in the next videos.